It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name is George Cooper and welcome to the show. Oh dear, it was a Yuri Tielemans 12th minute header from a John McGinn corner that sank Fulham's chances of getting that elusive away win at Villa Park. Villa have now equalled their 17-match unbeaten home run in the Premier League. It was always going to be a very tricky task, but it's not stopping us from feeling a little bit crestfallen after that one. Couldn't find the equaliser, leaving our European ambitions hanging on in the balance. Plenty to talk about. Actually, isn't there plenty to talk about? There's a few things to talk about. It was a bit of a stinker of a game, if we're being perfectly honest. But I've got two very esteemed guests to break down what little happened. Making his pod debut. I'm sorry it can't be on a better game that we're discussing. But Mr. Joe Gunning, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to be on. I've been a listener for a few years now, so it's nice to get on, complain about Fulham to more people. As you say, not much to go off on yesterday, but I'm sure we'll give it a good go.
Yeah, that we shall. And yeah, would mind just introducing the listeners to yourself. What's your background? How long have you been supporting Fulham? Where are you based? Yeah, what's your story, Joe?
Yeah, so I have a bit of an interesting story with Fulham. So starts off quite simple. My dad's a Fulham fan, started taking me when I was about 8. My first favourite Fulham player was John Arne-Riise. Don't know why, but was big John Arne-Riise fan. Then we actually moved abroad, moved to Qatar and lived in Qatar for 5 years. And that was during our not so sort of nice period.
The Banty years.
And it was difficult to kind of follow Fulham in Qatar because of the time difference and because we were so bad. None of my friends, they'd be talking about how they were playing in the Champions Leagues while I was talking about how we had like Blackpool away or something similar to that. And then when I was 13, then I moved from Qatar to Singapore and lived in Singapore for 5 years supporting Fulham. And because I was a bit older, it was easier to kind of get the games on my own, figure out kind of streams and FFC TV. So I could get into it a bit more, but oh my gosh, sometimes waiting until about 4 a.m. to watch us play some subpar championship team, get battered and go into school on like 2 hours sleep and get berated by my mates. It was not a great time. Then moved back to the UK when I was 17, went kind of to the games, and now I'm a Cardiff uni student. I've been told to shout out the Cardiff Whites supporter group. There's about 10 of us, but I try and get to as many games as I can now. At the beginning of the season, I'd gone to pretty much every away game. Then student finance got a little bit thin and things slowed down a bit. But I'm hoping to have some trips to Slovakia and Kazakhstan next year.
Yeah.
So I'm putting some of my student finance aside just in case, but we'll see if it needs using.
Yeah, I mean, what better way to spend your student loan than to visit some far-flung corners of the former Soviet Union. But anyway, Joe, it's great to have you on board, mate. From the new faces to the old guard, we're also joined by Ben Jarman. How you doing, mate?
Hello, Coops. I'm very well, thank you. Welcome to the pod, Joe. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Yes, all good, Coops. It's been a wild few days out here out west. I ran a half marathon this morning, so feeling a little bit beat. So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, we were chatting before we hit record, and Ben is not telling the full story there because he ran a half marathon coming off the back of quite a vicious bout of tonsillitis. So he had Fulham losing away to Villa, tonsillitis and a half marathon all in the same weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to churn through the kilometers and I was listening to Thursday's podcast. So I'd like saved it up specially. And I'm like coming into the final 3K and I'm listening to Jack and Sammy debate the merits of Emil Smith-Rowe against Phil Foden and Morgan Gibbs-White. And honestly, I'm like, I think I might just puke at this point. It was disgusting. I was like, I don't know what's worse, the fact that we spent 27 million on someone that hides behind defenders or the fact that like I've got raging tonsillitis and I'm 20k into a half marathon.
I don't know whether that would have been my choice of listening in the half marathon. I don't think I would have done a half marathon full stop, but hats off to you, man. Hats off. You got some 3-word reviews. If you wouldn't mind kicking us off. We've put off actually talking about the match for as long as possible, I think, and we should probably let's get this over with. Well, what did the Fulhamish listeners have to say in the 3-word reviews?
They had quite a lot to say, actually, especially on Instagram. So Instagram was my platform of choice this time around. I've got a few 3-word reviews that I really liked. First off the bat was CJ Hills with passports officially away, which I think could be like the front runner for the title of this pod. Although, we need some listens, so, we'll probably choose something else. Dave Bar 1 said, Yuri killing me, which I quite like. Young Comte said 11th on Monday, and right now it's Sunday, and we are 11th. So he predicted it. So if you want the lottery tickets, I would get in touch with this guy. He clearly knows what's going on. Another one I liked, mainly because his Instagram handle is so good, which is Payne_Tings, which is Villa beats Cottage. And the reason I picked this one out is because I have a Villa mate that lives here in Vancouver, and the first thing I woke up to on Saturday after watching the game at 4 a.m. was a ChatGPT image of a Villa stabbing a Cottage, and the Cottage with the Fulham badge on it crying. So there you go. And the last one I have is Joey Chapman 26 with Let's Keep Believing, because you always need a good one to end on.
Yeah, I like that one. That's a nice note to end. Also, what a bizarre use of artificial intelligence. Can you send me that image? It might have to be the podcast cover art.
Yeah, I will send you that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great weekend overall for our European ambitions. Joe, obviously, results not going in our way. Brentford got a 4-3 win over Manchester United at home. Brighton were beating Newcastle until last minute Alexander Isak penalty. So that's kind of given us a bit of a lifeline. But just sum up how you're feeling overall after this weekend. You've seen the results, and Fulham now, I feel like, have maybe lost their grasp a little bit on this European charge.
Yeah, normally I've only got one game of football to ruin my week, but now I've got 3 or 4 games of football to ruin my week, which is a shame. Everything that could have went wrong seemingly went wrong. I guess Isak scoring that last minute equaliser is a bit of a silver lining, but pretty disastrous weekend, to be honest. We didn't play well. Find ourselves not just out of the European place, but in the bottom half of the table. And things are not looking too rosy anymore. I think regardless of whether we are in the European spot or not, I like it when we're in the driving seat and it feels like our destiny's in our own hands. Whereas now it doesn't really feel like that with 3 teams ahead of us. Obviously, we've got kind of that big 6-pointer against Brentford coming up, which will be a real kind of tell as to whether we are serious about this European thing. But it just doesn't look like we want it enough, and that's a real shame to me. I think if we were getting beaten and we were giving it our all, and the players, you could just see how frustrated they were getting at the fact we weren't winning, it would be like, okay, this is still annoying, obviously, but at least we're going for it. But it just doesn't feel like that at all, and it does feel like our European hopes are kind of slowly ebbing away. I'm a bit of a pessimist in general, so I've kind of kept the notion that we're not going to get Europe this whole time. Obviously, I've been roped into. I spent about an hour and a half the other day working out every possible result and trying to figure out all the stipulations as to what could get us Europe or not. And I still don't think anyone really knows what is going to get Europe and why it's going to get Europe. I saw someone on Twitter this morning saying that maybe 9th could get Europe if United or Spurs win the Europa League, and Newcastle finish in the top 5. I don't know about the validity of that because it was Grok AI that was.
There is a weird stipulation where 11 teams from the Premier League could conceivably get European football, but I think that depends on Arsenal finishing outside the top 6 but winning the Champions League.
Yeah,
it's going to happen. So I think it reduces it down. I think the maximum that can get in now is like generally 8, like believed to be 8, because the Europa League final now looks to be between Tottenham or United, and it would actually be quite funny for United who having like their worst season on record to like stop Tottenham winning their first ever major European trophy in a final.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different varieties and outcomes. It's a bit like sort of trying to decipher. It's a bit like that sort of Pepe Silva meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I mean, he's just trying to frantically work out, like, make these connections and whatnot. But I think the thing that I'm most concerned about with this whole Europe charge, Ben, is the fact that we seem to be hitting a bit of a poor run of form at the absolute worst time. And when you flip that in comparison to what Brentford are doing, you know, this sort of last minute surge, I hate to say it, but it feels to me as if sort of it's advantage B's at the moment. How are you feeling?
Actually, fairly similar. We aren't playing great football, and if we're going to be really honest, we haven't been playing great football for probably the past 8 weeks or so. If I think about the teams in and around us, you know, all of us are streaky in our own different way. But I think Bournemouth have been able to patch together a really good run of form. Brighton as well have been able to pick up wins when they conceivably haven't, you know, been in the best position to do so. Fulham, on the other hand, haven't even been able to put together a 90 minutes that has convinced me that we are deserving of a European place for probably the last 6 weeks or so. And I think this Villa game probably encapsulated it. You know, there are periods of this game where we looked really lackluster. We were passing sideways. We had absolutely no intent. And I think that injury time, when we should have been going all out to try and get that goal, there was absolutely no intent whatsoever. We were kind of just passing it around and hoping that something sprang out of nowhere. And there are other situations throughout, you know, past games. You know, the one I can't let go is Bournemouth, because we talk about a relegation 6-pointer. That game against Bournemouth was a European 6-pointer. If we'd have taken 3 points off them, I genuinely believe that would have given us the belief and power needed to go on and get that European spot. But we blew it in under a minute, and we didn't ever look like scoring in that game either. I think there are passages in this Villa game that were good for Fulham, especially when we had Ryan Sessegnon on the pitch. And a lot of the 3-word reviews and a lot of what I've seen in the WhatsApp groups and what I've seen on social media reference Ryan's performance this weekend. And a lot of people referencing that Silva dropped the ball kind of twice in 1 week by removing Sess from the game there. But I think generally, on the whole, like, we just haven't shown enough over the past kind of 4, 6, 8 weeks to say that, yes, we really deserve that European place when teams in and around us have been able to pick up wins and we just simply haven't, unless they're against Southampton.
Do you agree, Joe? Do you feel like ultimately, if you look at the season on balance and the teams that we're competing with, that maybe we're just going to come shy effectively, and it's to do with the quality around us?
Yeah, I think it is true. I think I've said for quite a while that I think to boost, especially late on in a season, you need someone, an individual, to step up and kind of bring the rest of the team up with them. And I think that that's something that we really, really lack. You look at teams around us, and most of them, I don't think Brighton really do, to be fair, but most of them have a man who can step up and elevate the rest of the team. You look at Mbuemo at Brentford, Visser as well. Look at Bournemouth, you had Cliver, who just sort of stepped up. And it seemed in November, I put out a tweet saying, I think that Iwobi might be that player for us who can step up and elevate the rest of the team. But he's really looked kind of a shadow of his former self in the last weeks. And look, I hate to say that it comes down to quality at the end of the day as to why we're in 11th, but it just really looks like it does, that we're just not good enough. I think the lack of a direct winger has really affected our season. I think if Reece Nelson had stayed fit, I was just so excited to watch him play this season. And I think if he'd stayed fit, we would have effectively scored more goals and therefore won more points and be in a better place in the league. And you could also kind of point a finger at dodgy recruitment in January, not kind of plugging that gap. I guess we did sign Willian, but his minutes have been quite limited since we signed him. And I think that there's a lack of passion as well. I alluded to that earlier. That's what annoys me the most, that it just doesn't look like we care. And I think that's what's so refreshing about Ryan Sessegnon's performances, not just the quality that he's adding, but he really fights for it, fights for the ball, looks like he cares. I mean, you can see when he scores, he really kind of celebrates like he loves it. So I do think it might be a bit of a quality issue. Maybe we're just an 11th place sort of squad, and that's the sort of squad we've got. But it's a shame that we are tailing off as we are. I think also I rarely go 30 minutes talking about Fulham without complaining about our set pieces. I think our set pieces have seriously lost us points this season. You think some teams rely on set pieces so much. You look at us in 2 years ago, how good we were and how many goals we got. And just like I said before, goals are points effectively. So it's points that we've lost by being so poor at set pieces. And I saw a graphic of teams in the Premier League and all their set piece coaches, and we don't have someone whose kind of job is just to be a set piece coach. And I think that that's kind of egg on our face that we're losing points and therefore potentially losing out on European qualification just because we can't beat the first man from a corner, and there seems to be no sort of routine. And I could go on and on about how annoyed our set pieces make me, but I'll save everyone the hassle.
I think there's one really good thing that you pulled out there, Joe, is the difference in quality between us and the teams around us. We're playing a team this weekend in Aston Villa who reached the latter stages of the Champions League. And when I look at the chances we create versus the chances Villa were able to create and the quality of those chances, there's a distinct difference between them. I'm thinking about the Wilson chance where he should have done better with that header in the second half. I think about the Jimenez shot in the first half, and I think about the Iwobi shot at the end of the first half. All of them are from distance. None of them have really given Emi Martinez anything to think about. But then conversely, I think about the chances that Villa made. The Watkins chance at the start of the second half where they spring the offside trap. The Daniel Malen when he hits the bar right at the end of the game. Also the Daniel Malen chance where he flashes the ball across the box. But Villa keep that phase of play going and they get in behind Fulham and he follows up and nearly scores. I think that's what sets the two teams apart. In what one's kind of like this Champions League level team, and the other one is like this team that's kind of bumping its head on the rear end of Europe. Is that they have this cutting edge where they're able to keep phases of play going. They're able to carve out high quality chances from nothing, and they have pace and power all over the pitch. And I was listening to Jack and Sammy talk about this in the pod again while I was trying not to vomit. It was just like how the Premier League is now kind of transforming itself back again into this physical, speed-heavy, technique-heavy league. And I think about a lot of our players, and we don't have a lot of raw speed other than Adama and maybe a couple of other players out there that can match what Villa have, especially looking at Amadou Onana in the middle of the pitch. I always want to call him Andre because of that clip where it's like, my name's not Andre, mate.
It's not even my name,
but I think
bruv.
It's not my name, mate. I look at the size of him and he just cuts through our midfield, and the same with their wingers. And Joe made a great point as well. We don't have direct wingers. And I think, just in terms of differences, just their ability to create something out of nothing. At Fulham, we do create a lot, but they're not high quality chances.
Yeah, I mean, Onana is an exceptional footballer. I was being incredibly impressed. I think he would put in a near man of the match performance when Villa visited the Cottage, and he stands out. And you think about the quality that Aston Villa have, best goalkeeper in the world for number one, to start with, and then it just permeates that the whole squad. And we're going up to a very, very, very difficult. They're unbeaten in something like 17 games at Villa Park, and they really had to fight for that win. I had a little listen to Claret and Blue, which is a Aston Villa podcast, because I had a bit of time to kill. I've got nothing better to do, but I just wanted to hear what they had to say about the game, and they said it really wasn't pretty. They were all experiencing a bit of a kind of deflated mood after their disappointing couple of weeks, crashing out of the Champions League and crashing out of the FA Cup, obviously. And it felt like it was the sort of game that they just really needed to grind out. And they actually had some kind things to say about Fulham and the fact that we made it very difficult for them. On the flip side, we're talking about it as if it's like, we've been the feeling among the fan base is very kind of like crestfallen. But if you look at it, the facts, like Villa are just a better team than us. That you can't really deny that in any way. So I'm not feeling too. This was a game that we were never expected to win. Obviously, we went in with high hopes. We knew how important it was, but I don't think it's that bad that we lose 1-0 to Villa. I think actually there are a few aspects of the game, although it was flat and we wanted more, that positive spells. Should we talk about the goal? Obviously, it's disappointing to concede that early on into the match. 12 minutes, set pieces, as you were talking about, Joe. Not too great at defending it. Harry Wilson beaten first post. I mean, it was a great delivery, great header. Harry Wilson unlucky. He's obviously not the tallest person to stick on the front post. But anything more that we can do, or do you just put your hands up and say, you know what, that was a good set piece?
Yeah, it was a poor goal to concede. I think the fact that he was so open, I don't think it's great conceding a goal from a corner to a man who's about 5'9" in general. You mentioned putting Harry Wilson on the front post. Maybe that was a bad idea. To be honest, I'm not like a set piece expert, so I don't know whether we should have had a taller person there, if there was any sort of game plan in defending the corner. If we, like I mentioned, we don't have a set piece coach. I'm sure that obviously they'd looked at set pieces before and gone over kind of corner routines that Villa might have, but it always feels slightly disappointing conceding from a corner. It was a good header though, like you said, powerful header. Nothing really that I think Leno could do about it. So a poor goal to concede overall, but it's set pieces again that are undoing us. We're so bad at scoring them. We're not awful at defending them, but we're not great at defending them either. So yeah, disappointing. Disappointing is the overriding feeling for me.
Yeah, I mean, we made a few changes going into this match, Ben. I think Silva's hand was forced slightly. Obviously, Andreas Pereira unavailable. Muniz still out. I mean, how would you have set up for this one? We had Harry Wilson coming in, in the 10, which for a man who's not he's coming back to sort of full fitness. He's not got all that sort of many minutes at the moment. Do you feel like it was a bit of a roll of the dice from Marco, maybe?
Not really, honestly, because I looked at the back at the lineup this morning just to quickly refresh my memory. I thought there wasn't a lot he could have done with it, to be honest. There's some depth on the bench, but I don't think Willian is ready for 90 minutes right now. And I think there are a couple of also players that are probably carrying a little bit of an injury whereby you're not seeing the best from them. I like the return of Lukic in that double pivot. I think that's been key to our success this year, is the impact of him alongside Berger and how well they've been able to control phases of play, and a lot of the good stuff that we do comes through those two. The thing that concerns me the most is just the threat that we had on the left-hand side has now completely disappeared. Obviously, Anthony Robinson missed the last international break with the US and came out and said that he was struggling with tendinopathy, I think was the diagnosis in the end. And reading into that injury a little bit more, it's really hard to play through when you know that your tendon is on the verge of giving out. It's hard to maintain the level that he does for us. And if you look throughout the season, I think that kind of our ability to create chances, and he has double figures assists this season, and that kind of like the results tailing off coincide with him coming out and saying that he's carrying an injury and has been for the whole season. I just think we are lacking cutting edge from wide areas. But again, like circling back to your question, George, I wasn't too sure there was that much he could have done with the lineup. I thought, yeah, Emil Smith-Rowe played well against Southampton, but again, like Silva's someone that values meritocracy, and I don't think that Smith-Rowe has the credit in the bank for a full 90 right now. And I think that when he came on, he wasn't particularly good either. He did his old trick of hiding behind defenders. I will say that I thought Awabi was excellent again.
Yeah, he was one of the rare sort of shining lights in our team. I thought Bert Leno as well says a lot about the game, but I thought he deserves credit. He made some very, very important saves, in particular that curling shot from Tielemans that he got the finest of fingertips to tip round. It actually was given for given as a goal kick, and then obviously they played the replay on the big screens, and the crowd weren't too happy about it, and then Leno just flashed a wry smile, a knowing smile. But yeah, I thought Bernd Leno was very good yesterday. I don't know, it's a shame because we, as you said earlier, Joe, we never really looked at any moment like scoring. We had a few half chances. Harry Wilson couldn't really get on the end of that beautiful ball that Iwobi put through, and then the weak header, as you said, Jarms. And I don't know, I felt like the one sort of place that you felt like may have looked like popping up with a goal was Sess, but then obviously he got taken off. What were your thoughts on that substitution? Because as sort of Ben alluded to earlier, a few people were quite surprised by that one.
I thought that the reason why he would have been taken off had something to do with the fact that he'd been booked. I think that after he got booked, he seemed to kind of sort of slow down his press a little bit. He looked a little bit less like he wanted to kind of get up in everyone's grill and properly press for the ball. But I do think it was an odd substitution when we're chasing a goal and we've got players who look less likely to score than Sessegnon in attacking positions on the pitch. I would have liked to see him continue. I've said that I think he kind of really works hard, and that's what you want when you're 1-0 down, chasing a lead, a player who's going to work hard to get you back into the game. I was watching it at the pub with some of my friends, and I turned to them and I said, who is going to bring us goals off the bench? Who is actually going to bring us goals in this game? I just can't see where they're coming from. I mean, we've got Carlos Vinicius as our backup striker, and I'm actually quite a Carlos Vinicius fan, to be honest. But if we're being honest here, goals aren't going to come from there. Goals didn't look at all like they were going to come from Raul. Iwobi didn't look too keen to get himself into goal scoring positions. I think that Wilson had obviously been given a role to kind of drift past Raul, almost play as a bit of a false nine and make those kind of overlapping runs. Anderson tried to pick him out a few times. Obviously, Iwobi played that beautiful, beautiful pass to him as well that he maybe could have done better with. But I just really didn't see where the goals were going to come from. And I think that one of the issues that I'm starting to sense, and I hate to say it, is I think it might be time to have a look at breaking up the Thames barrier in Berger and Lukic. I think that they're great. I think they're both fantastic players, but it almost feels like we're playing with two sixes and not someone who's kind of progressing the ball into attacking positions. And what I personally would like to see, I saw other people saying it on Twitter earlier, is Iwobi in the 8. I think when we tried him out in the 8 last season for a few games, I think he was really, really good. He's obviously more of an attacking player, so always looking to kind of get forward. And I think Berger and Lukic both have the capabilities to be that kind of solo 6 and sweep up. Sure, they're no João Palhinhas, but they still are highly skilled defensive midfielders. And I think that something needs to change attacking wise going into these last 3 games if we want to see the goals kind of more flowing.
Yeah, I hear you, man. We need to definitely try and find some more clear-cut chances, because there were very few yesterday, really. And as you said earlier, Ben, about the quality of the chances that Villa created compared to the qualities of the chances that we created, there's a massive gulf there. I mean, obviously there was also the disallowed goal from Sess, which was a lovely finish, very instinctive, but I don't think anyone really thought that one was going to stand, did it? It was very clearly come off his hand. And I think that the fact that it kind of went in sort of was testament to the fact that everyone was just like, okay, well, clearly that's getting called up. No complaints from you, Jarms, I assume?
No, not particularly. I think by the letter of the law, it's right to rule out that goal because it did touch his hand and it influences the play. But I mean, it might have stood in the old style of football, mightn't it? But you never know. I think it was a really good finish and something that kind of came out the blue a little bit for Fulham. I think at that point we were kind of like trying to step up our game at the start of the second half. We actually came out the blocks looking quite threatening and then kind of tailed off for a point. And I think that after that goal was disallowed, it was when the wind came out of our sails a little bit, and the game went back to being quite tepid.
Yeah, it was quite strange as well, because Fulham ended the game with 10 men through no fault of our own. Obviously, Marco Silva had used all of our substitutes up with the old Hail Mary approach, and then Harrison Reed, who'd come on, who I thought actually looked really good when he came on, looked very dynamic, and the Harrison Reed that we all know and love. But unfortunately, he went off shortly afterwards, and weirdly, we seemed to kind of like string together some of our best chances after we were down to 10. I don't know whether that was sort of the last final push to try and get an equaliser. But Jarman, I just want to ask you where you sit with this, because a lot of people think that it perhaps is a bit short-sighted of Marco to use all 5 subs. To be honest, I think all the decisions that he makes are going to be very calculated and, risk reward. The chances of that happening, although it has happened to us twice this season now, I think relatively are small, and it's not unusual for managers to, use up all their substitutions going into the final 10 minutes. Do you think maybe it's a little bit cavalier, or do you think it was just a bit of bad luck?
Honestly, I think it's a bit of bad luck, mate. I think the 5 subs are there for a reason. And I think that Marco has actually bucked the trend this year, in that I used to think his substitutions were at times quite questionable. But I would say this year, his substitutions for the most part have been quite impactful, other than the past couple of weeks where he has even come out himself and said that he got it wrong. And I think he got it wrong on the Sess substitution in isolation. But the other one, I don't think he could have foreseen what happened to Reedy there. And that just happens to be a little bit of bad luck. My whole thoughts on the thing, a little bit similar to what Slaven Bilic said in the ITV studio after that game between, I can't remember when he just said, to be fair, I don't care.
I don't care.
Well, I think, yeah.
I think it's a good note to wrap up this first half. Anything else that we want to cover on the game? Any standout performances, Joe? Before we wrap up just put it behind us forever.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick out any real standout performances. We mentioned Leno played all right. It was, oh my gosh, it was refreshing to see him save a long shot. I think the long shots have really seemed to get the better of him this season. So it was nice to see him get a hand to that, and he made a great save on that 1-on-1 as well. But I think apart from that, it's hard to kind of pick out a great performer. I will say I did totally embarrass myself when Sessegnon scored that offside goal, celebrating loudly in the pub and not seeing that the ref had disallowed it, making a bit of a fool of myself. So I was particularly annoyed about that. But yeah, I'm more than happy to put the game behind us, forget about it. Yeah, done now.
Nice. Yeah, I've been there, by the way, Joe. When you celebrate a little bit too loud. The one that I get is that my local pub, it's not really a football pub, but they put the football on, and obviously, like, Fulham fans are relatively rare compared to some of the other sort of like bigger teams in the Premier League. So quite often, I don't know whether you found this, lads, but you'll find yourself being the only person who's actually like invested from a Fulham point of view watching it in the pub. And then I was watching, and then when you get a goal, it's just one bloke standing up celebrating really loudly, and the rest of the pub's just like, what the hell's going on over there? Sort of like completely oblivious.
I've never had a better experience of that than when we beat Chelsea 2-1, the Carlos Vinicius one. And I was in the pub surrounded by Chelsea fans just going absolutely berserk, giving it large, getting the dirtiest looks from every corner. But I was too happy to care.
That's what it's all about. What a nice note to end. Anyway, let's put the Villa game behind us. We've got 3 incredibly important matches to round off the season, and it's still all to play for. Welcome back to the Fulhamish podcast. I'm George. I'm joined by Ben Jarman and Joe Gunning. Before we kick off the second half and some of your listener questions, I just want to say a massive congratulations to Fulham FC's women's team, who have been promoted to the 4th tier after a long time battling it out in the division. It's been a long time coming, but just wanted to say massive congrats to the women's team, coming on strength to strength. Right, let's move on to your questions now. we'll start. I picked these up from Instagram today, and they've got some, with loads actually. So thanks for everyone who got in touch. We'll chuck this one to. Actually, I want to hear what both of you have to say on this one, but we'll start with this one from Jack Freed, who asks, do we still need another year to grow as a club before we start thinking about Europe? And I mean, there's a lot of dimensions to this question. Obviously, I think the most obvious one that I think is the question of squad depth. I don't know whether I'm pretty certain that the squad in its current iteration wouldn't be able to withstand the demands of European football. But yeah, what do you think, Ben?
I actually was having this conversation with Charlie on the Fulhamerica podcast a couple of weeks back. We were discussing what we thought it would take for Fulham to get into Europe and whether we thought we would actually be ready for it right now. And I believe in the core of the squad, we have enough quality to get into Europe and challenge on a couple of fronts. But I feel like in terms of just building where we are right now and that squad depth, we probably are a couple of players away. And I think that we would do well to invest and really push for it, but it's not within our nature to do something like Bournemouth did this past summer and spend 40 million on a striker, for example, or something that Forest did a couple of seasons back and spend 45 million on Morgan Gibbs-White. It's just not what we're built to do. I think what Fulham typically do very well is, is find a lot of value in the kind of like lower end of the market, those kind of like 5 to 15 million pound transfers, and then really try and extract as much value from those players that are ready for the here and now. I would kind of like Fulham to switch their model a little bit, maybe go a little bit younger and bank on potential. But that potential, I would like to see a little bit cemented a little bit more, and have less of an injury track record than some of the young players that we have previously invested in over this past summer. You can work out who I'm talking about there. But I do believe that we are ready to take a charge at Europe, but we can't afford to stand still and let Brighton, Bournemouth, Palace and all of those, and Brentford, stream past us like we have this season. I think I've spoken on the pod a few times about Southampton and how they kind of a few years ago were always hovering around that kind of 8th to 12th position, and then one year they stopped spending and then they just disappeared, and then they came back this year, obviously only just beat Derby's record. And I don't want to catastrophize too much because this has been a good season. We're probably going to smash our records points total. We are nudging on, as I said, like the bottom end of Europe, but without the proper investment in this squad to keep pushing it, I'm worried that we could get stuck in the quagmire of the middle of the Premier League.
Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to decide whether we want to take that step forward. I think it's quite hard to sustainably be just a mid-table side. Palace have obviously achieved that for many, many years now. But I think in general, you mentioned Southampton, and we've seen it with lots of teams in the past, that they kind of are in and around that area and then suddenly just drop off. And we need to make that decision as a club whether we want to step forward. Like the question alluded to, do we need to grow as a club? And I think we do. In terms of adding depth, obviously, I think that's key. I think that there'll be quite a few familiar faces leaving Fulham at the end of this season, which will obviously be a shame. But we need to look at it as an opportunity to bring in fresh faces, not to undermine a competition that we might not even qualify for. But I think if we do get into the Conference League, we will be able to play some of our weaker players and still hopefully get a result. So we could see more performances from players like Cuenca and Diop and Josh King and Marshall Godo. So I don't think that we particularly need to add quality for the competition, but I think some depth in terms of, obviously, our players already without European football look really weary at the moment, and adding a game every week would be terrible this season. I don't know what we would have done with this current crop of players if we were having to play one extra game a week. So if we do get Europe, we will need to add quite a lot of players, and that does mean spending a bit more sensibly, kind of as you said, Ben, adding kind of spending less money on more players. We do like to do some pretty shrewd business like that. Obviously, Cuenca we picked up for quite cheap. If we can get other sort of players that fit that sort of role, then I think we'll be all right. But for now, I guess the focus is on actually getting there, which isn't looking too likely at the minute. But yeah, I think if we do, then definitely get some more depth in.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you raised, because I remember the last time we were in Europe, when we in the earlier stages, we'd see the likes of Bjorg Helgerisa playing for us, Stephen Kelly, Eric Nevland, the players that weren't necessarily in and around the sort of like starting lineups in the Prem, but we do have really good players that are coming through, and Europe would be an ideal opportunity for us to get some minutes into Josh King and the like. I think that would be one of the best things that could come out of qualifying for Europe. Yeah, on that note, we've got a question here from Bear Hug Pete 2.0. New and improved Bear Hug Pete. I'm not sure what the original model was saying, but he asks, which reserve team players do you think stand the best chance of breaking into the first team? Joe, I know you dabble in the you follow the Fulham academy quite closely. Who've you spotted that you have high hopes for?
Yeah, I think apart from the obvious Josh King and Marshall Goda that we've seen already, some names that have been highlighted as potential kind of big players are Callum Osmond, first of all, striker, popped up with some really, really important goals last season, especially. I think he won some sort of award. I don't know if it was the Premier League 2 Player of the Season or something along those lines. So he's a player that I've seen a lot of people saying that they want to be involved already. People are saying that if Vinicius is more than likely on his way out, why not put Callum Osmond on the bench and give him a go? A player that's probably would be absolutely try and take that opportunity and be hungry for first team minutes. Apart from him, we've also got players like Seth Ridgeon, who is quite a big player in the youth England setup. I think he's quite a bit younger than some of the other players in that under-21 side. I think he's kind of stepped up from under-18 to under-21 quite early, which is obviously promising, a good thing. He might be a bit too kind of raw. And then finally, I'll touch on one more player, a player that we thought we'd see a lot more of a couple years ago, is Luc de Fougerolles. Obviously, he came in for that pre-season tour and looked so comfortable and not out of his depth at all. And he's been nursing a long-term injury over this season, so he's been kind of struggling for minutes. He did look good, so I'd like to see him get some more minutes as well. But as you say, the Conference League would be the perfect time to give these players game time. If not, I don't really see where they're going to fit in, apart from the likes of Josh King, who I think is good enough. And I think it is a real shame that we haven't seen more of him. I get that Marco likes using experienced players more. We've seen that quite often. He's never really sort of fully entrusted a young player since Fabio Carvalho. So I'm not sure how many minutes Josh King will get next season, or if we'll send him on loan maybe, but I think he is someone that we could have perhaps utilised a little better.
Yeah, he's an exceptional talent, and obviously everything that we've heard from him and everything we've seen of him leads us to believe that he's going to be featured more and more. So I imagine next season will probably be the breakout for Josh King, would be my prediction. We've got a question here from Gregory Palm for you, Jarms. I'm going to throw this one to you. He asks, does Adama impact the game more as a starter? I think my personal take on this is that, it's been the age-old debate, isn't it, whether Adama is best coming on against tired legs or whether he's best starting. I think that we've seen him be effective from both of these positions, and I don't think it's quite as straightforward as he's better one or the other. It depends, obviously, the opponent and who we've got available in the squad. Have you got any sort of particular take on this, Ben?
I think it actually depends on the formation that we're playing, because he's looked markedly better in that kind of 5 at the back formation, where he doesn't really have to do any of the defensive duty. All he has to think about is, how quickly can I get in behind? Are they going to play me in behind? And, am I faster than that fullback that I'm trying to get in behind of? Which generally 9 times out of 10 he is. And one of the things that I was actually going to touch on, George, when you asked about the lineup, was like the only conceivable change that I think a lot of people are talking about is getting Adama into that lineup. But recent weeks, he has not looked interested whatsoever. I think Southampton, he just looked, I mean, it was just nothing short of awful, I would say. So I think that it all depends, George, as you say, on the formation and the opponent that we line up against, because that's what really, gets the best out of Adama and working into those big spaces. And I think that that's ultimately down to Marco's decision making and his interpretation of how our opponents are going to line up. That being said, I would love for Adama to prove that he has a lot more in his locker than he's currently displayed over the last few weeks.
I don't know, with Adama, I just feel like he just is one of those players that has the ability to pull out a assist out of nowhere. He's just, I absolutely love having him in this squad. He is a live wire. He's unpredictable, but sadly the flip side of that is that sometimes he just doesn't show up and he's ineffective. You never know which Adama that you're going to get. It can either go in your favour or it can go against you. But yeah, I think the debate rumbles on as to whether he's better on the bench or starting. Let's loop back into the Europe conversation, because let's face it, that's all there is to the rest of this season. We talked earlier about who we think is going to be favourite for that. Let's sort of assume that 8th position is what we're kind of like gunning for, and it will be enough. I sort of said I think Brentford are probably favourites now, looking at their run-in. Mercer Stew agrees. He says, looking at their fixtures, are Brentford now favourites for 8th? How massive is that game for us? So if you look at who Brentford have got, they've obviously got Ipswich, Ipswich away, Fulham at home, and then Wolves away at the Molineux. So pretty favourable run-in compared to Brighton, who've got Wolves away as well, Liverpool at home, and then Tottenham away. And then Bournemouth have got a very tricky run, and they've got Villa at home, Man City away, and then already relegated Leicester at home on the last day. So it's kind of it's kind of very hard to call. I mean, Joe, obviously it goes without saying we've got to beat Everton. That's just an absolute given. But it's a straight shootout at this point, right, between us and Bees. And I mean, I'm already feeling incredibly nervous about that game. How's your head when you look at that fixture? Because it was always going to be a big one. When the fixtures came out, you saw it, you're like, okay, if there's anything riding on that. And then it turns out there's a hell of a lot riding on it.
Yeah, it's going to be one hell of a day leading up to it. I'll probably wake up a few hours before. Normally I like to listen to closing credits Bolero, the music that we walk out to psych myself up for games. So I'll probably have that going for an hour or two before, trying to get the nerves away. But it is huge. Like, there's as long as we beat Everton, that is. I don't want to skip over Everton. I skipped over Southampton before that and said, when we beat Southampton, and we saw how difficult we made that. So hopefully we won't make Everton so difficult, so that then we can put all of our eggs effectively into that Brentford game. The last thing we want is to go into the last 2 games of the season with nothing to play for, feeling flat, going into a derby, kind of just going, well, don't really care what happens. So I think it is massive, and the fact that it is against Brentford as well, and the fact that they're going for the same thing as us, just kind of builds up the tension even more. And I'm sure that there'll be quite the back and forth going on social media before the game, and regardless of the result after the game as well. So hopefully we can get a result against them. But I guess time will tell. I think it really depends what Fulham want to turn up.
I actually feel a bit sick, Ben, thinking about it, and it's really not a good time to play them either. They've hit this really, this purple patch effectively. I mean, I don't know how's your head going into this one. Again, I don't want to skip over Everton. Not meaning to disrespect them anyway. It's obviously going to have its challenges, but I mean that this game is huge.
Yeah, it's a massive game. One thing, again, that Charlie and I were talking about was this kind of run-in, and we basically said that we thought 9 points was about where Fulham would top out at. And we actually pegged Villa to be a loss and then to beat Brentford. So if that happens, I think I'll be absolutely over the moon. I think Everton aren't there to be sniffed at. They're the kind of team that would probably be a bit of a banana skin for us, especially with Moyes, having them to play the way he is right now. I could see them like a Beto 92nd minute winner. I could definitely see that happening. But I would love to beat Brentford. I think I didn't really care too much about Brentford until I went to the old Griffin Park with a few of the lads from the podcast, and they beat us, and their fans were insufferable. So I wouldn't mind putting it over them.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially at Legoland. It's always nice to win there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's still obviously we're despairing slightly after the Villa game, but we're still very much in this, lads. And I kind of think that should be the note that we end this podcast on. Beat Everton, and then we've got a huge 6-pointer at the G-Tech Lego Stadium. So let's have it.
I think it's just worth pointing out that I saw someone say on Twitter that if we do beat Everton and Brentford, then regardless of the other fixtures, regardless of what happens, we will be 8th. And I think that's something quite positive to think about, because we played 2 days before. Obviously, they'll have a game in hand, but it would be nice to kind of get ourselves back into that position and just get the confidence back kind of as a fan base, not just for the players, but go, all right, like we really are still in this. So I think that's just worth keeping it. It made me feel a little bit better about the state of affairs when I saw someone mention that.
Yeah, just a small matter of Manchester City at home to contend with if we do get there. But, it can happen. It can happen. I think that's all about we've got time for this podcast. Joe, thank you so much, sir, for making your debut. Very solid 90 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you, Ben Jarman.
Thank you for having me, mate. It's been good to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you like to name the podcast? It's the last thing to do.
I'm going to go with Let's Keep Believing, despite what we've talked about for the past 54 minutes.
Let's have it. I think they call that clickbait, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much, chaps. And yeah, we'll be back on Thursday. Sammy and Jack will be talking about the Everton game. Huge game at Craven Cottage. But until then, have a great week. Thanks for listening, and come on, you Whites.